Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the next presentation. I'm Andy Bellamy and I work for AJA. We are a company based out of Grass Valley in California, and we are mainly what you would call a signals company. We deal with acquisition, conversion and delivery of video signals. So what I want to talk about today is the file-based evolution. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some of the ways the things that we manufacture have helped our customers to make a transition from tape to tapeless. So this is ongoing around the world. As one nation starts to move, another one is just beginning that process. So we spend a lot of time traveling the world working with lots of different companies. At the moment, I'm spending a lot of time in Iceland, where the big transition is SD to tapeless SD. They're going to hold off on HD because they think maybe 4K might be the more dominant format out there. So we're all different, we're all doing different things. Regardless of the definition, going to tapeless has a lot of things that you've really got to try and think about. So I'm going to try and not give you too much of a hard sell on what we sell, but tell you why it made a difference to the people that have employed it. We'll leave questions till the end, and what I would prefer you to do is if you've got questions, sort of see me after. We'll try and get through everything we've got in the next 45 minutes, and anything at the end you can see me afterwards, and we have a stand F29 where we have many of the things that we're going to show you today. You can actually get hands-on and have a look up close. One of the other things is I'm going to try and give you a sweetener at the end. If you can make it through to the end of the presentation, one of our colleagues in Norway at the Norwegian national broadcaster NRK produce a program called Don't Ever Ever Try This at Home, and that's pretty much a file-based workflow. So they very kindly loaned us some clips to show you. So it's a different world for them, but I think you'll find the clips quite entertaining when we get there. So there is a little sweetener at the end. So we'll start with really where we sit with these products. So 3 ranges. Acquisition is really what we're going to talk about. We make a product called the Key Pro, and the Key Pro has been around since 2009, and I'm sure many of you have seen it or have been aware of it. So we've got the longest standing third-party relationship with Apple as ProRes encoders. So we are encoding in hardware, taking a signal in, and as you can see, it looks a lot like a VTR, and we're going to turn that into ProRes so we can go native throughout. In terms of where does ProRes sit, we're all familiar with it. We're probably 99% of us use it at some point for one thing or another, be it mezzanine, be it delivery, or acquisition. And it's available in everything, right? It's compatible with any major NLE out there. So you can link with Avid over AMA. It's native into CS6. There's ones we miss on there, but things like Sony Vegas, there are other NLEs which do exist which will take this in as a format. And over the last few years, we've seen it really emerge as being probably the most popular mezzanine format. The other one obviously being Avid DNX HD, but we'll come to that shortly. So one of our biggest clients in the US is the Antiques Roadshow. So the Antiques Roadshow do a large show, a large rolling roadshow that's moving constantly, big heavy shooting schedule, all HD. So we're going to use them as an example. I realize it's the American version we're going to talk about, but the principles remain identical, exactly the same. If you're involved in a rolling program and you're using HD cam, this would work for you. And any variation on those themes, anything where you've got lots of tape coming in and you really want to try and manage that workflow in an easier fashion. So 6 cities each summer is huge demand for them. So they roll around, and remember, in terms of the geography, they've got a lot more to cover than the Antiques Roadshow in the UK. They set up on a Friday and they shoot on a Saturday. So the pace is very, very quick. Okay. Once they're finished, they strike the shoot. That's done. They break down. They move on. That's it. So they've got one shot really on the Saturday to get it done and get it done right. The scenario that they shoot within is pretty straightforward and no different to really our concerns if you excuse the frame rate. So swap out 2997 for 25 and everything's the same. So HD, 1080i. They do 3-in-1 on one set, so they're using the set for lots of different purposes, so it's very demanding for them. Well, this is the main thing. They record non-stop from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Now, you all know the moment on the Antiques Roadshow where they zoom in and they've got the guy that's got the thing that's worth £1 million or whatever. They're waiting for that moment, but they have to churn through a lot of things that aren't worth a lot of money before they get there. So they're rolling continuously. And it has been pointed out to me that perhaps the definition of antique in the US is probably slightly different to the definition of antique in the UK. So they wait a while before they find something interesting. But it's HD cam. They rent the decks. This is their back end, so you can see the tapes lined up. We've all seen things like this, right? We've all been involved in this kind of scenario. You can see all the decks tucked away. They stop shooting for tape changes. That's the first thing. So no one's shooting. The tape's out. The guy turns up with $1 million thing. You've got to do that again. You've got to start that again. You lose a little bit of the realism around that and the surprise. So that's a concern, or was a concern for them. 30 tapes a day. So it's expensive. That's a lot of tape. That's a lot of real estate. You've got to work out. You've got to ingest. So their workflow, again, really no different to most people's workflow in this respect. Into Avid Media Composer and at low resolution. So this is all done for the edit. So low res, and then of course you know what's coming next. We're going to conform at a higher resolution. Okay. So we've seen how they work, and we've already seen that's a lot of tape. There are things which are going to slow down the process of shooting, perhaps get in that golden moment. You could be changing your tapes over, and you're going to have to do that again. So they wanted to look at a different way of doing it, and of course they're going to go tapeless. Now they really thought this through. This is a long, ongoing shoot for them. They weren't prepared to just go straight in and adopt the products that we do and just go and hit the road. That wasn't going to happen. Extensive white papers were done internally. They really, really went through so many hoops, or we did, should I say, with them. Very demanding client, as you'll see. So we went through all these hoops. We went through the white papers. If anybody wants to see the slides with the white papers, I can show you. They're not very interesting in this scenario, but they do exist. So I can prove to you exactly just what quality control hoops we jumped through. Their verdict was after their testing, they were going to try the Key Pro. So first things first, it's affordable. The US dollar rate on this is about $4,000, so somewhere under £3,000 here. It gives them a format they can use, so ProRes in this instance. So the Key Pro unit is a ProRes recorder. So that was fine for them. That was standardized for their workflow. This is one of the main things. It looks a bit like a deck. We put buttons on it which look like buttons on a deck. It's got peak metering, and it's about yay big, so it feels solid. It feels secure. You're not feeling like you're going to transition out from a large deck into a software-based system. And then there's nothing wrong with software encoding, with good cards, people like Gallery and many other solutions out there, and that's a very, very good way of adopting a tapeless workflow. But for them, they felt more comfortable in knowing that it was a resolved hardware unit that stood alone, that could just get on with the job. So that was all part of it. Fewer expendables. So I don't know exactly what the UK cost is on servicing something like a deck, like a HD cam deck, but I would imagine it's running into the thousands. It's not cheap. Certainly more, as far as they were concerned, in the US than it is to buy one of these or rent one, whichever your preferred route would be. So the switch, this is interesting. So this is happening simultaneously. So they had a whole period where suddenly the shoot got more expensive rather than cheaper and probably got harder to handle. But they wanted to make sure they could run both things simultaneously before they actually got off the tape and weaned themselves off it and went cold turkey with Tapeless. So this was important for them. So this is how they set up. So this went on the road. This is the same unit that they use. This is a custom setup here with this case. So this obviously folds together, wheel in, wheel out, nicely configured, ventilated so it will work. You know, they would call that a small footprint. It's about this big, but as far as they're concerned, that's a small footprint. So how did they shoot? So we should look a little bit about how they actually brought this shoot together. So this is the main side of it, okay? So we've got 4 ISO cams, and they're dual recording, okay? So one side, we saw the 2 sides of the thing. So one side is doing ProRes HQ. So that's coming in 1920, 1080, and that's 10-bit 422. So it passes muster against HD cam as a recording format. SR and HD cam are excellent ways of recording, in pretty much the standard digital format for passing around on tape, as we all know. In terms of comparison, visually lossless, I know it's a term which doesn't hold up and mean that much, but in a blind test, you wouldn't tell the difference between the two. If you have a scope, it's probably a slightly different story, but it's not too much of a different story to not consider making the change. So they're recording in 2 sides. So they have a proxy side and a HQ side. So the feeds are cascaded through. So we have the 4 ISO cams, and then we have the mix down at the bottom. So this is all happening, all simultaneous. So one side is recording in ProRes HQ, the other side is recording the proxy, and both are going into the bottom with the mix down from the desk. We said 30 tapes, so we've got 30 hard drives. So 500 gig hard drives. But remember, we are doubling up on both sides, and then we have a process of filling a tape and moving on. 3-hour record time per drive, and as you'll see later on in the presentation, this has changed a little bit. This is roughly a year old, a little over a year old. So in terms of what they're doing now, they have larger capacities, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to talk about it as a 3-hour record time on that drive. It's fast turnaround for them. They can fill that, move on. So they're changing, I think, roughly twice a day, and then they've got another one just in case. So that's how they go about doing that. So in terms of the way they would change a tape, I think the way that was something like 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes tops to change a HD cam tape. It takes roughly 2 minutes to change a hard drive. So the chances of getting that nice moment and not missing it are increased with your drive turnaround over the actual tape-based workflow. So this was another thing that we jumped through the hoops with them on, the data. How does the data work? What do we get? I'm giving up this thing I've spent all these years hanging on to and feeling very confident about my tape. I like to put it on the shelf. I know it's there. Anything goes wrong, I can go back to my tape. What do I get on a hard drive? The structure is as you would expect. It's really no more difficult than a folder with a bunch of mobs in it. The actual unit itself uses a dedicated naming system. If you want to use our system, it will run through and it will incrementally increase the name of each file as you go through. So you're not going to erase a file. This was a great fear of them. An operator comes in, puts the wrong tape in. What happens? The wrong tape. Force of habit. The wrong hard drive. What happens? Nothing. It just records another name and it just keeps going. So you're not going to lose any data by overwriting it. So that was one of the main things they wanted to look at. If you want to use your own naming protocol, you can. And as we'll see later on, there are a number of camera systems which provide file naming protocol, which we can actually pick up as metadata. You can capture that and bring that in and put it in the file structure. So that's one way of doing it. Easy to navigate, easy to click, to see, to mount the hard drive, see the files, preview them. They're MOVs, so they'll play back on a MacBook, or if you're going to use them on a PC with Mac Drive or similar, you can just double-click it and you can instantly visually do a QC and know that file is 100%. But this is really the big difference for them. The other things are all nice, and that really helps. This is the big one, no ingest time. They were doing it all overnight. So 30 tapes is, that's going to an external company. It's all happening overnight. It's coming back. So there's a box of hard drives and a box of tapes. Just have a box of hard drives is the easier way of doing it. So no ingest time whatsoever, so that you're not having to pay for someone to do that. You're not having to pay for the time, and you're not losing that time. You're going straight in, and there's a company we're working with out in Iceland at the moment. As I said earlier, they're doing an SD to tapeless transition, and it saves them 4 days. They shoot Icelandic MasterChef, and they were doing it all on beta. As we said, it's all SD, and it was 4 days, roughly 4 days ingest, because there's 4 ISOs, and then the mix down, and the backups, and everything has to be put in. They're getting it done. The whole thing transfers onto their SAN in a morning. So it's brilliant. You're getting to the meat of it much quicker than you would do with tape. Final Cut or Media Composer. They weren't tied down in any one particular area. They can use both. And as we saw earlier on, we're not really talking necessarily directly about those two NLEs. What we're talking about with ProRes or with Avid DNX HD goes further than just those two. They could get creative. There's more time to use the interesting shot, to maybe work on a couple of edits, to really play around with it, get the producer and say, we've got this amazing moment, we've got a number of different ways that we can put it together. What do you think? Rather than, we've got 3 hours, get it done, get it out, let's just, sausage factory, get the product out. This gives you a little bit more time, buys you more time to actually make something which is engaging as opposed to just being processed, which I think is a very key point. The Avid workflow, we'll have a little look at that. So again, the ProRes files are linked via the AMA. So easy, drag and drop, you're linked into your media and you can work with it. So that's how they really went about it, and that still continues to this day. So they've moved on a little bit in terms of the kit that we provide them, and I'll show you some of that. But that's the key pro, and as I say, really what we're talking about is using a product which, if we're very comfortable in tape land, we're going to take something on which feels and operates and has the robust nature of a tape deck, but with all the benefits that come from a file-based world. That was then. So 2009, that product came out. So we've got a long-standing in doing encoding, but we realize it's a big, wider world than ProRes, and Avid is obviously a huge thing for most people. So Key Pro Rack was something we introduced, not just because of taking that form factor to a rack, that was one thing, but there are a number of things in that that really do help in terms of your workflow. So yeah, it looks like that. We've got them running on the stand so you can see it. And I'm not going to spend too much time giving you the hard sell. It's just a deck, really, but we stretch it into the 1U rack format. 2 drives on it, just making it easier in terms of driving swap out. So we can do a hot swap while you're shooting. But the main thing is ProRes and Avid DNx HD all in one unit. And one of the fundamental things to come back to is it's hardware encoding. So the quality is assured and the quality is consistent throughout. We're not using virtualization or a way of encoding which is dropping cycles. We are using dedicated hardware to do that. And that makes a big difference in terms of the quality and reliability. And they work on their own. So in a OB van environment, you can have them all slaved. You can put a feed in, it feeds time code, they'll all start recording. Do it all on its own if you want, or you can go and press the buttons. It's no difference. It's going to do the same thing. RS422. So really, we really can operate like a deck. You can put a shuttle on it, and the main protocols for Sony 9-pin are observed on this. So if you've got someone that's used to that and that's the only way they want to work, they can still do that. You want to scrub, you can scrub. It's no problem. Something like a JL, Cooper or similar, we can use with this. It's an interesting world in terms of SD and HD, as we said, and everybody's different around the world. And one of the key things, as I said, for you to understand is, say, going back to Iceland as an example, they're all SD, but they do have an eye on other markets, and sometimes they will have to have HD content that they want to put in the SD pipeline. So the Key Pro line as a whole, you can bring in HD and you can do a hardware down convert. So how do you want to do that? Does it need to be pillar box? Needs to be anamorphic, 4:3, whatever the format you need to do, we can do it in hardware. You're not relying on an operator to render that out from a timeline, and you're not allowing someone to make their own preset to do it. We standardize around the delivery formats that everybody knows and uses. So that's a key point, and that's real time. So you've got an hour you need to convert to SD for somebody, it's going to take you an hour. You're going to hit record and it's going to play through. So very, very straightforward. Genlock and timecode connections as you would expect. So just looking at it, yeah, that's the front. Obviously, the 2 drives I said was the main thing, but the back is much more interesting. So this was really designed around OB van use because we added 8-channel AES EBU, so that's on there as well as an I/O. Traditional formats, 2-channel analog. If you want to go analog on that, we can do that. As well as the 2 power supplies, which is pretty much a necessity for most people in the OB van world. We also add a LAN port. So the LAN means we can do remote control. We can take control of any number of units remotely on any browser on any system. So you're able to see at a glance what is happening with any of your decks, if you want to call them that. Your Key Pro racks will tell you what's happening, what they are encoding at, and if there's an issue, if a power supply fails, we're going to be able to see that within the browser. We talked earlier on, they're doing roughly 3 hours before on the drives. Well, now we do 750 gigs. So as it says there, over 6 hours of ProRes at the highest quality and roughly 6.5 plus hours of Avid DNx HD. So I took it over to Iceland and being slightly naive about their workflow, said, oh, you're going to get all of this. And he said, SD, great. 4 times that for you, no problem, more or less, in the formats that they're using. So they get an awful lot out of a 250 gig drive. But for us in HD land, this is a reality that you will be changing less. Now, the caveat to bear in mind, and just to try and turn away from the product side to workflow, is the bigger the file, the longer the transfer time, the bigger the file, that's then got to be dropped in the timeline. You've then got to sub-clip it. You've got to edit with these larger files. That's fine, and if it's ISO feeds you need and you want to pull in the big files, that's okay, but it's just to be borne in mind that you are bringing in massive amounts of data that you're then going to try and scrub and then edit. You can work on smaller drives as a turnaround. Depending on how you want to feed into your editorial workflow, if you've got a very demanding workflow, using a smaller drive system means just swapping out. And to go right back and use an analogy from years ago, film. 10 minutes on a can was what everyone was used to on your film stock. So you were building around those takes. If you go back many, many years to films like Hitchcock's Rope, it's done in continuous takes. Well, each continuous take is roughly 10 minutes assembled together because that was the limit that you could record at the time. So you worked around it. Everybody knew the limitations of, we've got 10 minutes, we know we're going to swap this over, it's going to go to the lab or whatever. The same with this. It's not so much trying to achieve the longest recording time on a drive, it's about managing a recording time for you on a drive size that fits your workflow, that can be backed up easily and moved around. Because if it's 750 gigs coming back every time and everyone is full, you have to then account for that, not as an ingest time, but as a transfer time. But things change in the world of protocols for transfer. So we've come from a world where Firewire 400 was a massive leap forward at one stage, right? That happened for all of us, and that was tremendously exciting. Firewire 800 obviously doubling up on that. Fantastic. But since then, we've moved on a little more. So Thunderbolt and USB 3 occupying the highest bandwidth. So Thunderbolt being bidirectional, 10 gigabits per second. That's a huge, huge bandwidth. So transfer times, very, very quick. This drive I'm showing you now is USB 3. That's 5 gigabits a second. That's still pretty good. I think most people would agree. And the reason why those protocols exist for us is because one is predominantly PC-based and one is predominantly Apple-based. So Thunderbolt is really in the domain of Apple at the moment. That will change with time, and that will move on. But certainly speaking personally, using it more or less daily, you kind of get used to it, and you wonder, how did I get by with USB 2? Firewire 800 seems a little sluggish by comparison. So transferring times are getting much more improved with something like this. And also, you've got a video village environment, or it's an OB-VAN, or something is going to feed into your SAN, or wherever you're going to uplink your content to. Having a dock really helps. So the dock means you can have that dedicated to a machine with USB 3 and Thunderbolt. So very, very straightforward in terms of how you can transfer your data and share it with the rest of the production. Yeah, I mean, this steals my thunder a little bit. I've already told you this, but the 12 times faster, 5 times faster, but 10 gigabits per second and 5 gigabits per second are the transfer speeds for those particular things. And this is really another thing that comes up very well in OB-VANs, is the sheer size and heat output of larger tape-based technology. That's where it sits within that infrastructure. So that's an awful lot of kit, and we can then revolutionize that and just stick it in one rack, one U space, giving you all the power that you had before, but you're turning it around much, much quicker. Everybody wants to look at everything all at once these days when you're on set. We can feed 4 people, if you like, 4 monitors from that one particular unit. So all of our outputs are live simultaneously. You don't have to drill through a menu and say, oh, okay, I want that one on, that one off, or whatever. They're live. They're all live. And as we said before, we could ingest and bring in material, and we could record it in a different way than it was actually coming down that signal pipe. So 1080p, you want that 720p, no problem, or SD, no problem. We do it in hardware. The same happens on the way out. So one of the main things we find a lot is that people are still, especially now more than ever, is you want to integrate, not completely get rid of everything and start from scratch. It's just economically not viable for most of us. Using CRT, grade 1, or similar, or kit you've got already, we can feed a signal which is accurate. The color space will be accurate on it, albeit obviously if we've got SD monitoring, we're not really seeing the HD picture, but we are going to see something which is pretty accurate compared to what's coming down the pipe. So we are able to feed those monitors with a signal that they need. There are other key things as well. We can take one of the feeds and say we'll put a super out on it. So see the time code, see it running, when you're recording, red dot. Standard feature on set for most people that we provide, but you can decide which one of the outputs does it. So on the back of it, we had HDMI. So you could buy in, as I've seen people do, 100 quid, just a crappy 100 quid HDMI display, just simply for a visual guide as is the time code running, hook it in, fine, you're off. Nice and easy. So that's a feature we added recently. The other thing is as well, you can see there the RS422 and the LAN at the bottom there. So we've got that control enabling us to help with those processes rather than drilling through the menus. But yeah, transfer over Ethernet. Again, just to really drive that point home, it looks like a deck. It feels like a deck, and it works on its own just like a deck does. So that gives you an idea, modules, and how that would work. And that's on the stand. And obviously, any of you that are interested in looking at something like this, if you contact your AJ dealer, they should have a loan unit, or you contact me directly. We can work with you on how you might want to integrate and support you in that process. So we're happy to answer questions, to field your concerns accurately about your workflow and give you an idea of how that might work for you. In terms of the cost, it's the same as the other unit we saw earlier on, the Key Pro. So we've not really changed the pricing structure. The early unit, we can't do Avid DNX HD on it. It's worth pointing that out. When that was developed, that was never on the roadmap. So we have a feature set there that we've not added enough grunt, if you like, to record Avid DNX HD. This was designed in line with both in parallel. So significantly increased power within that unit. Not knocking the original Key Pro, because it's still a live product for us, and you can still buy it, and there's still a ton of them out there doing a hard job all day, every day. Ari were using one in their presentation to play the files back. It's easy to just rack up your ProRes, because you can drive a full projection system or HDMI system with it. It's nice and easy. These are just the new improved sizes, so 250, 500, and 750 on the USB, and that's the dock that we produce as well. So that gives you an idea how that works. If you're going to go run and gun, we do the Mini. So the Mini is designed again with ProRes in there. So this is on your shoulder. We mount on a Rails kit, standard Rails kit, and we record to CF card. So we're not in the market to put a monitor on those units, because then you have to put it in a particular place that you can see it. And we believe generally in most circumstances in the field you've got an EVF or an operator which has a dedicated monitor. Rather than combining the two in one, we're just going to record the signal. As I said, that's really what we're about as a company, is taking your signal, encoding it, and putting it somewhere else. And that's what that unit does. 10-bit, the same thing as the other unit. Looks very similar. I don't think we've found a camera system yet that it doesn't work with, but the caveat is we say virtually any, just in case someone has found one that it doesn't work with. Much like everything else, one input becomes two outputs, or three outputs, or four outputs. So we're never the end of the signal path. So whether we're driving HDMI or SDI in, we're driving both out without having to then make a decision. This unit doesn't down convert or up convert or cross convert. It's just a straight recorder. The size of it dictates that we keep it to just a single task. The GUI is quite interesting though, so just give you an idea about how that works. Standard browser, you set an IP range that's comfortable for you. Networking is, I'm the worst person in the world at doing it, but I can do it, so anybody can do it. Set up fixed IP addresses, and you just dial that in to the browser, and there you go. You can see what's happening with it at a glance. So anybody working with those units, you know what they're doing. But more importantly, you could save a preset and clone it across a number of different units, so you know everybody's doing the same thing. Mounting is exactly what you would imagine it to be. We make it the same plate that covers every single mounting option there is out there. So very straightforward. And in the field, you go straight to edit. So obviously that's showing you Final Cut 7 there, I would have thought, or is it Avid? Not sure. But anyway, regardless, drag and drop. So CF card straight in. It's a HFS Plus volume on there, so if it's a PC, you are going to need to have Mac drive or similar. But that's a very easy way of bringing that in. So that's kind of where the file-based world works for us, or did. But as we said at the top, everybody's got different concerns, and the buzz everywhere, obviously, you'll all know about it, is 4K. So I just wanted to just talk a little bit about the file-based world for 4K and what a difference that's going to make. So, okay, if we've got my friends in Iceland there in the corner, then we've got 4K at the other end of the scale. Big consideration, big data, big files, big res. There's a whole world beyond the stuff I'm going to talk about that you've got to consider. But what I wanted to point out was different ways that those files can be dealt with, because we get into this world of this scary thing called RAW. Tomorrow's presentation is going to focus mainly around RAW workflow, and also the way that we can help you with that, be that F65, ARRI, whatever your input that's RAW, we have something which we think will significantly help your workflow and increase your productivity. 4K camera system, so the Canon C500, which they have obviously on display here, and we have one on our stand that they very kindly loaned us. We're a technology partner for Canon over the development of the C500. If you know anything about the C500 camera itself, it's a superb sensor, 12-bit sensor, 444 recording, super 35mm size, Extremely sensitive in low light conditions, super blacks. It's a really, really nice camera based around the C300, which was their HD version. As it stands, the Canon C500 only records HD internally, so you have to look at an external option in order to take your file. So you, like it or not, this 4K is a file-based world. There isn't a 4K tape. If there is, correct me, but as far as I'm aware, there isn't. So we're going to be in a file-based world anyway. So how are we going to deal with the camera system? We've been working a lot in 4K anyway. If you've seen any 4K projection pretty much anywhere in the world, we make the cards that go in the projectors or that sit in the DCP side of it. So we're fully integrated with a number of big manufacturers that provide OEM kit for. So that's been going on for 3 or 4 years. So we've got quite a good standing in 4K. That technology has now been adapted and put into KeyPro. It's a KeyPro Quad. So KeyPro Quad looks very much like the other ones, but we've made significant changes. So no SD. This has moved on. So 4K, Quad HD, 2K, and HD. So this is where we get into the world where HD is a proxy format, which is a strange and wonderful thing to say all at the same time. Support 10-bit 444. So there's no point having a 12-bit sensor that's sampling at a full bore rate without recording it. We can do that with the unit. RAW support. That's another thing entirely. So that's a story for tomorrow. But RAW, in terms of when you've got raw data, suffice to say, it's huge. It's very, very big indeed. So that's another consideration. So we're going to look at really how we record this in terms of SSD. So do you want to record uncompressed? Yes, you can record uncompressed. The reality of recording uncompressed or raw means you've got massive files, even bigger than before, that you've got to try and move around and cope with and deal with. But our old friend ProRes is pretty good at producing 444 and another 4 if you want, in a compressed format which is easy to move around but yet still has a nice fidelity. And depending on where you're going with it, the caveat here is it's really down for you to decide with your shoot, with the delivery, the people that you're working with, which is the best way to work. Do I want to work raw or do I want to work with ProRes? Raw would be really part of a shoot where we're talking about doing lots of compository work afterwards. So effects shots, things which are complex, extremely complex, that would benefit from that extra data to push and pull and curve and bend in the post side of it. Definitely raw, without question. Standard commercial use, it's harder to say. Certainly in terms of producing documentaries, if you're going to do something in 4K, ProRes is going to give you an easier way of working. And it's much, much smaller. We can provide data afterwards if anyone wants to talk about what does an hour mean and things like that. We can certainly go with that. But I'll just skip through a few things on this. It's a tad bigger than the other one. That's how it sits on the camera system. So again, nothing too difficult there. Now, we said before we don't do monitors. We do a monitor on this one because it's what we call a confidence monitor. Can I see my signal? Yes, I can. That's fine. So we think that's important for this particular camera that we've done. In terms of the way that it works, it's no different to the other ones. I'm not really going to spend any time on going through all the individual features of it. Come and see us on the stand because we've got the unit. You can have a look at it there. Again, a bit like the KeyPro rack, it's nice to look at the back. So 4 SDIs in and 4 out, Thunderbolt, and also HD SDI and HDMI out. Lots and lots of ways to work there. So even though we're a Canon partner, there are other technology companies out there making camera systems which we work with 4 or 2 SDI links to your system, and we can cope pretty much with all of those or some of the ones coming as well. So a quick look at the RAW workflow. We'll show you how that works. So 4K RAW, the actual recording unit itself is really helping with the transfer of the data to a Promise, something like a Promise R6. So I think these are now coming in 10 terabytes. Again, we've got them on the stand if you want to see one. Really powerful. Thunderbolt, so we can drive big data through it, and we've got the capacity to record big data and move it around very quickly. We use a laptop on set as well, and then also a combination of software from AJ and Canon gives you the color development. Now, tomorrow is about RAW, so we talk about what happens with the Bayer sensor and the way the image is sampled. But suffice to say, if any of you have actually worked with a RAW output on a camera system, you'll know it's green, it's washed out. So there's twice as many green pixels as there are red and blue. So we want to see, how does it look? How can I see what my image looks like? By doing this file-based workflow, we're able to then do that. We can develop that. But the key thing is that's all in real time. So this all takes place in real time. We can monitor, record, and see our files, make a decision to record a RAW format, which I think is .rmf, which is Canon's format, or DPX. DPX really gives you a bite at every cherry. Everybody uses DPX, more or less. I can't think of a single post-production pipeline that doesn't use DPX at some point or can take it. So we're giving you a file format that is massive, it's huge, but everyone can take it. ProRes side of it is a little more straightforward, I guess. There's certainly less equipment involved in that respect. We have SSDs in the top of the unit, so we're recording to the SSD. We have a little dock. We can then transfer it into the dock, and again, Thunderbolt or USB 3 into a laptop. We're showing Final Cut 10 there. You can do 4K in Final Cut 10 if you want to. That's up to you. We're showing that as compatibility at the moment. As more NLEs catch up with 4K, we will adopt that, and it will be able to be used within them. But just like the other one, it's real time. So you're not having to wait. You can see things. The ProRes that we record is debayed as well. So again, a Bayer sensor creates this green dominant image. We are then back sampling, creating a new image which is accurate to the colors that you saw on set rather than a washed out green image. And again, as I say, that's real time. Turning to monitoring on set, debaying is, as we said, it's a file-based world for the way we're going to work here, but we still need to see what we're doing. We still want to monitor it. All of those are live, so we don't have to make a decision. A 4K monitor, if anyone's priced one up, wow, that's a lot of money at the moment. It will come down. Canon have got something around the corner I think everyone will be very interested in. And in terms of other manufacturers, TV Logic, Astro, there's a number of people out there doing it, Sony obviously as well. We can drive a 4K monitor full bore, but we can debay it, which is really important. You can see your image accurately, and we're the only third party making a hardware recorder for RAW and for 4K, which will actually allow you to see that on set. Otherwise, you're going to see an image which you're going to have to work with later on, and you're going to have to make decisions later rather than on set. We'll give you the instant feedback, which is really, really important. So just to recap on the workflow. Very straightforward. One or the other. You don't do both at once, so you will record one or the other. So scaled HD, that's a neat thing. So we have a monitoring system, so you don't have to go in and decide, okay, this is dedicated HD. It's already HD. So we would imagine that most of you adopting 4K workflows won't be plumping for a 4K monitor on set just yet. If you do, great, we're there. But if not, your existing monitoring system can be used. So we're going to see the image in its proper fidelity on a nice monitor that doesn't have to be 4K. Just backtracking slightly, if we go back to the world of HD Cam and then HD Cam SR, and we talk about dual link and 444, there are a number of camera systems out there which will allow you to do dual link out. Now, Sony produced the SR master recording system, superb, fantastic system, not knocking that at all, but it's not cheap. Not cheap at all in terms of actually having to acquire a unit and then the media. It's very expensive. You can do it with this, and it's the same price as the other units. So it's $4,000, roughly £3,000. So we are able to record that dual link in and record that to ProRes 444. So again, compository work or demanding green screen for HD environments where 444 would help, we can help with that. And if you're an existing F3 owner, you're recording internally at, I believe, 35 meg. Or thereabouts. It's a big sensor and is capable of much, much more. And I think the results that you would see swapping over to 444 in a file-based world, you'd really benefit, especially, as I say, in chroma key environments. Cost-wise, yeah, it's going to be the same money. It doesn't come up here, but I wanted to show you a quote. This is from Canon, and it's their take on how they believe it will work in the real world when you're shooting. And they, just to paraphrase what Ashoka-san is saying there, is that you're able to revolutionize your workflow. It's powerful, it's portable, and it's cost-effective. So the cameras are one thing, okay, they're expensive enough, the lens, the infrastructure in terms of the post time and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to give you a way that you can transition easily from tape to tapeless and then take a leap from HD to 4K in a way which is palatable, not masses and masses of raw data. If all you're doing is acquiring it and moving it to someone else, that's fine, we can give you that. If you want to take it on your own shoulders, ProRes is going to give you a much easier day in the edit suite. Monitoring is the thing you have to work out for yourself. We do editorial cards, we can show you those on the stand, but we're just going to talk about the files. So just to recap, That's the unit itself again, just with the little SSDs, and we've got one on the stand, so by all means, drop by and have a look at that. Is that going to come with the next thing? Okay. Okay, so that's the hard sell, if you like, over the products. I said at the beginning I wanted to show you some footage from a file-based world. And this is some footage from Don't Ever Ever Try This at Home, as I said before. This is by NRK, who are the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Norway. Now, they are very advanced in their adoption of workflows. They have a very vibrant economy. I think that really helps in terms of the money you've got to spend on your workflow. This is a very demanding environment, as you'll see. Now, really, really demanding environment, an environment which explodes on a regular basis. So a file-based world is pretty essential for these guys. I must point out, we're given kind permission to show the actual clips. They are not saying that you must buy this kit on the basis that they use it. I have to point that out, otherwise I'll get in trouble. Steinar is the guy that I know there, and he's the head of technology, and we have to make that distinction. But they wouldn't be able to work in a tape-based environment in what they do. And you'll swiftly see why that is. But they used all the products you've seen here, Key Pro Rack, Key Pro Mini, and the Key Pro larger unit itself. Not the quad yet, but if they go 4K on this stuff, it could be quite exciting. You'll have to forgive the size it will come up. It's only embedded. We've got a mismatch between this and the actual monitoring system here. But I think you'll get the idea. Does anybody speak Norwegian, or is Norwegian in the crowd? No? Okay. There are a few swears in there. I will point that out. They're not bleeped, so they bleep for broadcast, and they do swear in English. So I will apologize for anyone who's offended by that, but I thought I'd point that out. But it's pretty good footage, so have a look. See what you think.
Så til 115 gram dynamitt, så er det cirka 10 steikeplater stykkelse da.
So to paraphrase what they're doing here, this paint has got explosives in it. TNT. They've painted a room and then they've exploded it. So this is shot in 4 days, edited on the Friday. So that's what happens when you blow up dynamite-based paint. The guy in the high-vis jacket is the explosives expert. And the main running gag with this program is this guy can't add up, and he always puts too much explosive. Makes for better TV, I guess that's the gag. Yeah, that's a lot of cables ruined there, right? This is their environment. Okay, this is amazing. They're going to try and blow a hole around the piano to drop it to the floor below. That's all they're trying to do.
Ja vel, vi klar?
Yes.
Fyr her!
Yeah. That's a phantom camera behind a glass coffee table, which they destroyed the glass. The phantom was repaired. But again, all file-based, all running into Key Pros. Yeah, they should have blown a hole, but they blew the top floor out, more or less.
Vi har blæst ut alle vinduene i andre etasjen.
Ja.
Og så har vi blæst ut noen vinduer i første etasjen.
He's explaining there that the camera's dead and someone's in trouble.
Går ikke an til å spille på en gang, vet du. Her har jo vi da selvsagt koblet ut.
This is my personal favourite. If you've ever wondered what would happen if you took your combi boiler and sealed it up and then just turned up the heat and left it. This guy's the heating engineer, by the way. He's always wondered. His face is a classic, right? That's genius.
Fy fader, for en smell!
I think they have health and safety in Norway, I'm not sure.
Noe efter! Har du sett Hele veggen er jo... Har du sett dette her? Det er biter av grunnmuren som er slått løs.
Pretty much the #1 show in Norway, and it's syndicated across Scandinavia, and I believe it's coming here as well. So our kit gets a fair hammering in this environment. Oh, this is the go-up for table, right? Yeah. So, not cool. But we survive. We survive. I think the kit is a little battered and a little singed around the edges, but it does keep recording. There aren't any drop frames. They couldn't do it to tape, essentially, I don't think, in this kind of environment, is the point we're trying to make with this. Just one more clip, and then we'll finish. So this shows you some of the other things that they get up to. This one's a little shorter. That's if you've got a box of fireworks in your living room. So they use a phantom camera to record these high-speed workflows, and then they're played out into a Key Pro Mini and recorded, and then straight into the ProRes environment. They never really use the original phantom material. They'll bounce it straight into a Key Pro. And if you've wondered what would happen if you tried to fell a tree with TNT,
Da vikingen kom til dette landet
show you
for
now.
over 100 år siden, så var det jo først og fremst på grunn av skogen og trærne at de slo seg ned akkurat her. Siden den gang har nordmenn
yes, he's explaining they've got the guy that you saw earlier on with the high-vis jacket to work out how much TNT it would take to bring down a tree. One tree using charging wire rather than the actual, anyway, you'll see.
3, 2, 1.
So yeah, it takes out half a forest, I think. Yeah. I think it's a glowing endorsement anyway, privately, that we can survive their highly demanding conditions. Yeah. I should point out these houses are scheduled for demolition anyway. They're only doing somebody else's job. Oh yeah, Christmas gone wrong. It's all happening.
Vi har fader meg klart å tenne på et hus igjen.
You get the idea with that anyway. But there are clips online. I believe it's coming here anyway. So do search on YouTube. There's some fantastic ones where they're, you're putting cans of beans and things on top of cookers and so on and so forth. But a file-based world for those guys, or a fire-based world, one of the two. Thank you very much for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your show. Do come drop by F29. Thank you. Cheers.